basically, we're at Saturday and Sunday between 10 and 5.
Okay, so all the quilts come from...
It's October 8th, 2011, Bailey Avenue School in Plattsburgh, and we're at the Quilters Show. Susan, how are you?
I'm good. How are you,
I
Gordy?
got your first name right.
You did?
Sherlin. It's Susan Donahue, and you're the chairman of this year's event, and you've been the chairman for a while, right?
This is my first time.
Is it really
and
your
last
first time?
time?
Well, this Champlain Valley Quilters Guild of New York is a fabulous organization. I didn't realize until I was doing some reading on it that you guys have well over 100 members, 150 members?
Right now we have 133, and the membership will increase after today because people come to the show and want to be part of our group. And we were at peak about 170 last year.
Were you really?
So we have
You do a quilting show every couple years.
Yes.
And this time it's at Bailey Avenue School, and it looks like you have hundreds of quilts on display.
We do. We have 350.
Is that possible?
Amazing.
You know, you would think that this wonderful old hobby and art of quilting wouldn't be as popular as it is, but it goes in cycles, and right now it seems to be on the way up again.
I think in the North Country it never went down.
Really, just always been very popular.
It has. It's a wonderful art form.
It is. I just took a little sneak preview around before Calvin got here, and I just cannot believe how many fabulous quilts. I don't know how judges can possibly choose.
I don't either. I'm glad I'm not one.
Now, you're a retired teacher.
Yes, I am.
You taught with Gib Brown, my friend
did.
Gib Brown in Ostable,
Yes.
for a long time. And when did you get into quilting?
Oh, I think maybe 20 years ago,
Really?
probably. It kind of just happened, you know? Like many of the women in the guild, they did cross-stitch and they did knitting or crocheting or some fiber art form, and it transferred into quilting when we finally started getting better quality fabrics and more materials available to us to make our job easier.
So you started making a quilt. How long did it take you to make the first one?
I don't think I ever finished it.
Oh, you never did? Oh, like many of the things I've tried to do over the years.
I have a lot of those at home.
Oh, you do? Oh, you have made quite a few over
I have
the
made
years.
many and taken classes with amazing teachers. And many of the women in our guild teach. We have classes through our guild.
Oh, isn't that terrific?
And they're reasonably priced, and it's just wonderful that we learn all these new techniques and get to spend time together. You know, that's so important for a woman.
Oh, it is. And
is.
before we start walking around, just tell me how quilting has changed over the last couple hundred years.
Oh my goodness. Well, in the last just in the last 50 years, it has become a vehicle for expression that we now have materials for that we didn't have before. They would stuff a quilt with newspapers way back.
Really? I did not know that.
They would use, in England it's called wadding, we call it batting. And the materials were very rough. They would use old blankets to stuff inside the new quilt, anything to keep it warmer. And back in England, the itinerant quilters would come from town to town to town and stay with the family in exchange for room and board and make all the quilts for the winter and move on to the next
I did not know that.
house.
That's like the clockmakers used
Yes.
to do. That's amazing.
Yeah. And early in this country, leftover scraps from clothing were used to make the quilts, and it evolved finally into its own art craft form, and now we have amazing manufacturers of fabric and batting and threads and all of the materials we need to make nice quilts.
So every weekend, there are a clique of ladies who get together and stitch quilts. And
Well, it's not every weekend. What our guild is, as you know, large. We meet once a month. But in that guild are many smaller groups of women that have their own groups that meet weekly and quilt together as a smaller group at someone's home usually. So
it's wonderful. And now, this is a 2-day event,
Yes.
I understand.
It is.
We're doing this on the first day, on a Saturday at Bailey Avenue School, and it's open at 10 o'clock each day?
10 to 5
We're starting
today.
a little early before the hordes arrive.
Well, we can still get through the halls.
Oh, we can. It's interesting to have it stretched all over the building like this. Sometimes they have it inside a big gym in one building, and this time it's up and down the hallways. That's kind of neat.
We've been very fortunate to be able to get Bailey Avenue School, and for that we're very thankful to the administration and the principal here, Nancy Jean Osborne, for welcoming us. This is a perfect venue for us because we love the space, we know how to use the space, it has wonderful access to parking and the Northway, and we can put our signs up, and because Monday is a holiday,
Oh, that's right, Columbus Day.
it's always Columbus
Yes,
Day weekend,
yeah.
and that gives us the weekend, Monday to relax and catch our breath after putting the show on.
Now, just one more question, and then we're going to walk.
Okay.
Most people in the guild do this as a hobby,
Yes.
but some
Most
are
of
actually
it.
making money off of these things.
Well,
Not much, because what they charge for them probably earns them about 5 cents an hour based on some of the time it takes. for
if they're
people.
lucky.
Yeah.
Yes. We have quilters that sell quilts. We have quilters that do quilts on commission. We have quilters that are long arm quilters. They just do the quilting on the finished product.
Oh.
And that's their living. We have a few quilters in Plattsburgh that do that for a living.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So now, if somebody wants to join your group or learn more about quilts, people knock on my door and say, "Where are the quilters?" And I wasn't always sure who to direct them to. How would they find you, Susan?
Me?
Yes,
I'm in the
you.
phone book.
Oh, you are. That's easy.
But if they go online, it's Champlain Valley Quilters Guild, New York, CVQGNY.org.
Everybody goes on. Okay, they can find some names and numbers.
They can find names and numbers, they can find when we meet, and we're going to have a membership table set up today so people can join here today.
Hopefully you will have 500 members by the time you leave,
The last
or at
show.
least as many as you have quilts here.
Oh, 350, I don't know where we'd meet.
That's incredible. Who's been working here for days hanging these quilts?
Well, we haven't had days. This is the school. The kids had school yesterday. Our quilters started bringing in their quilts yesterday at 4.
You gotta be kidding me.
No, we have amazing women in this guild.
Oh, women are amazing anyway.
And they were here at 4 o'clock yesterday, and at 8:30 last night, it was done.
I love it. Well, let's begin by looking at the viewer's choice from 2 years ago.
Isn't that
Tell me a little
amazing?
bit about this quilt. That's so fabulous.
It's just stunning. Every one of those little pieces of fabric was hand sewn down. The edges were tucked under, and it was hand stitched on. And then when that was done, it was all machine quilted in between. But this probably took her 2 years to make. It's a labor of love.
In the beginning, they had to do it all by hand, right? Way back when we were
yes.
talking about quilting many, many years ago.
And many quilters still do hand piece.
They do.
Yes.
So it's a different process for some. Some of them have it machine done. The last putting the blocks together.
Right. But we have. There are so many. Once you get into quilting, it's very involved. There are many techniques, many different approaches, and you find what you're most comfortable with and what you enjoy doing most, and that's the path you take.
I bet you we entice a few people to get involved in this today, because it's just, as an art form, it's just so fabulous.
It's incredible.
I just love it. Well, we're going to pause for 1 minute and let people go by us, and then we're going to have a little tour, okay, Susan?
Wonderful. I'd love
Right.
that.
Another Sue. Sue Mitty, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
I'm delighted to have you here today. Tell us about this quilt. We love it.
Well, last year, one of the members of the Parkinson's disease support group who is also a guild member, asked us if we would participate in the Parkinson's disease quilt project, which was going to be shown in Stockholm, Sweden. And so the objective that they had was to create 16 blocks so that we could have a quilt for Clinton County, and that's what we ended up doing. There were people from the support group and people from the guild who joined together and made blocks. Some of our guild members made blocks, and we came up with this incredible work of art.
It just blows your mind.
Yes, yes. And so the blocks honor or recognize certain members of the community or just in general.
You know, like so many people, we all have friends and relatives who've been assaulted by Parkinson's disease.
Yes.
And I see a few names on here, people that I know.
Yes,
Knew.
that's right.
Isn't it great to honor them and something that will hopefully last for years and years?
Yes, it is, and our members who happen to have Parkinson's are just such an encouragement to the rest of us, because they live such wonderful lives, even being afflicted by the disease.
Well, it's so misunderstood. I
Yes.
have a very close friend, and he and I drink a lot of coffee together, and we talk about the disease, and it's so important for, once again, to educate the public.
Yes, yes,
This is what a good vehicle.
yes.
When was this finished?
Let's see, June of 2010.
And it's traveled a little bit?
It has. It went to the Congress, and then they also allow people to get the quilt for their local quilt shows, which is what we did.
Isn't it great? I love it. So you've been involved in this guild for a while, Susan?
For a couple of years. For a couple of years I've been involved, and I really love it. It's an amazing organization with wonderful, wonderful people who do really great things.
Well, we agree with you. We've only been here for 10 minutes. Thanks so much for talking with us. For a lady who was a little shy about going on TV, I think she did very well. You got the Gordy Little lip smacking syndrome there. Thanks a lot, Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A reminder again that we're at the wonderful Quilters Guild Quilt Show at Bailey Avenue School in October 2011. And I just happened to see a picture of this quilt online before I came here, but, you know, a picture never does a work of art justice. Tell me a little bit about this quilt, Susan.
Well, this quilt is, let me back up. Every show, there is some group of women in our guild who gets together and makes a quilt to be awarded to a group who applies for it to raffle off, and they keep all the profits from it. So it's a fundraiser for one of the local groups. And this year it was awarded to Family Promise of Clayton County, who helps families who have lost everything, and so the profits from this will help support that group.
And there's so many families this year that qualify for those help. It just makes your heart go out. Those of us who live on high ground look around, and we see these stories of the floods and fires and devastation of all kinds that can hit people. Mm-hmm. And we all have to be conscious of that from time to time. But what a beautiful quilt. So how many people were involved?
Well, ultimately there were 2 of us who finished it, but there were 7 of us who started. It seems to fall into the chairperson's lap for some reason, and we get excited about it. This quilt was finished last winter.
Oh, no kidding.
Because we wanted to give the fundraiser time to get it out, to be seen, to sell tickets, to reap as many benefits as they could.
One question I have is, are they, most of these big ones are standard size, or do they vary?
That's one of the problems with quilts. The designers don't have standard sizes.
Okay,
So-
but whatever works on a given day.
And that's why when you were asking earlier about where are the quilts in the building,
Yeah.
well, they're wherever they would fit, based on their size. Because some of the ceilings are lower than other
that's
areas,
true,
so we have to work
too.
within those limitations.
Oh, these wonderful racks. Somebody has to own these racks.
This one is privately owned.
Ah.
The wooden racks belong to the guild, and you'll see metal racks around. We've rented those this time.
Oh, you did.
We didn't have enough time to get enough
my
racks.
Goodness. Yeah, where do you store them?
Kenwood's Moving and Storage has been wonderful
they are
in
wonderful,
storing our racks for us, because they sit there for 2 years.
Of course
and then
they do.
we scramble over there and pack them all up into trucks and bring them over here and put up our quilts, and then on Sunday they go back again and stay for 2 years.
You know, I have pictures, because I'm a history nut, and so is Calvin. And I've seen paintings and photographs of the old-time quilters with the great big racks in somebody's living room or
Yes.
parlor, or somewhere. Do they still do that
They
too?
still do that. They still have quilting bees and hand quilt on the big old
Do
frames.
they really? Oh my God.
And I can remember being the one who had to be underneath, picking up the pins and feeding the needle back through. Because
Come on. I never knew
I
that
was the
about
little
that
one.
aspect. Somebody has to crawl underneath the quilt?
They usually get a child to help out with
Oh,
that.
really? The short ladies help too, right? Oh, my goodness. So anyway, of course, this will be broadcast on the local cable stations and on the internet at Plattsburgh.com and HometownCableNetwork.com well into the future after the raffle is finished. So just give us an idea when this raffle will take place.
The drawing is tomorrow afternoon
Oh,
at
it
4
is
o'clock.
at the end of the show.
Yes.
And you hopefully make quite a bit of money on it every
Well,
time.
I hope the group makes
Yeah.
a good profit on it,
so-
and it'll
so
help
do I.
support them because everything's been impacted by our economy, and they really need some help.
Sure, boy, you said it. That's the understatement of the century, isn't it? All right, let's move along.
Okay.
I wish I had a nickel for every school gym that I've appeared in over the last 50 years since I've started in the media here in Plattsburgh, but one of my favorite all-time places is right here at the Bailey Avenue Gym. Watched a lot of youngsters perform, told a lot of silly stories, and sang a lot of songs. And so we're in the gym again, and what have we got in front of us?
All of these items were donated by members of the Guild for the silent auction. All these coffee cans have numbers that correspond to the items hanging up on the curtain, and you buy tickets for a very low price, and you put your tickets in the ones that you think you'd like to win, and then at the end of the day tomorrow there is a drawing for each item.
Now, most of these are smaller than some of the ones we've seen, and some of them are very small. So I guess, like you said before, size doesn't matter, as they say.
No, it
It's
doesn't.
amazing.
Yes.
And some of these are incredibly
Aren't they
creative
beautiful?
and talented. People use, where do most people get the inspiration for their quilts? Do they do like I do and sit down at the computer and say, somebody's got to help me, I have to have a
Well,
topic?
that's part of it. The computer. There are wonderful quilt magazines available, and we have wonderful quilt shops in the area. And they're a nice place to go hang out.
How many, for example? Now, you have members from how far away?
We have more than 2 members from Lake Clear.
Oh, you do?
We do, and they come to every meeting and help out with everything. We have one lady who comes up from Glens Falls. We have several people from Champlain who come. We cover the whole area.
And across the lake, Vermont has its own guild?
Vermont has several guilds.
Do they? Do you do things together occasionally or not?
We do. We interact a lot. Unfortunately, they ran into a problem, and their quilt show this weekend is this weekend too.
Oh my goodness.
And it's
How did that happen?
They just forgot. No, they didn't forget. They had a problem with their place to have their show,
see.
and they were backed into a corner and had to have the same meeting.
Logistics again.
Yeah, so we're hoping it doesn't happen again, because we all want to go over there and see their show too.
It looks like you have at least 50 items or more here in
Yes!
the silent auction.
We do.
That's incredible.
Well, one of the local shops went out of business, and she donated many, many of the shop samples. That was,
Oh. Wow.
and one of the other quilt shops in town donated a lot of their shop samples, and that was Loose Threads. There's also Ma and Pa's. There's Fiber Junction in
Oh,
Champlain.
what wonderful names.
Yes,
Fiber Junction. Isn't that a classic?
it is. And I'm trying to think what other quilt shops we have locally. We have more, and we go to Glens Falls, and we travel. We'll take day trips and go to lots of shops.
Well, you know, I think it's important not only to show the quilts today, but to talk about the Guild itself and what a wonderful opportunity it is for people to socialize, get together with friends and neighbors and people of like interests.
And that's a major part of
Sounds
the
like
Guild.
it's rewarding in so many ways for you and for the other.
I've made wonderful friendships through quilting and the Guild that I never would have met these people otherwise.
How many guys in the Guild?
Right now, none.
Aha, come on, guys.
But
Some people
we
love-
have had men join, and we have amazing male cheerleaders.
Oh,
They were here
cheerleaders.
last night putting
Oh,
up
they
all
were?
the racks, and they were wonderful.
I just guessed at that because I know there are a lot of guys who love to sew and make things, and
There are many male quilters in the area, but it's intimidating to join a big group of women.
I was telling the people, somebody the other day via email or Facebook or one of those sites, that I've worked with and for so many women over the years that the gender is not important to me, except that I always bow to the distaff side as being the superior gender in every way. And all the meetings I went to as a crime victims advocate for 8 years involved 594 women and Gordy.
Good
Ask
for
me
you.
if I ever complained. Never.
So you've been a
once.
cheerleader your whole life.
Of course, of course. I can't believe how many nooks and crannies, as my mother used to say, we have filled with quilting things today.
Oh, you've only just scraped the
We've
surface.
only just begun. All right, let's move along.
Okay, we can look at some of the quilts. We also have a consignment shop and a boutique. We're selling new items, and then we're selling quilters items to quilters or anyone else who wants to buy them.
And food, too.
And we have wonderful food in the cafeteria,
Is it that
amazing
wonderful?
food,
Of course we do.
including breakfast items this year.
Of course, have you looked at every single one of these quilts yourself?
I've tried.
Do you personally know all the people who worked on these quilts?
Many of them.
Isn't that amazing?
Many.
I wonder how many retired teachers are into quilting.
Oh my goodness, many.
Are they really?
Yes.
And it's all your fault too, right? You
No.
got
No, they were there before me.
there are so many things going on below the surface of our daily lives that we just don't know enough about, and that's one reason why Calvin and I love to do a show like this, because you learn. It's an education for me.
It is.
And it's eye candy. These quilts are eye candy.
They are.
What can you tell us about any of them that were standing around?
We could talk about that one.
Right behind
the
Calvin's back is another one. All right, we'll shut the camera off for a minute. All right, we're back again. You like this one?
I love that. I love the break.
Tell me a little bit about it. Calvin said before the camera started, "Oh, look at all that little stitching in there. That was done by machine."
It's done by machine, but the person is holding the handles of the machine and very carefully machine stitching
It's
that
hard for
area.
me to picture that, holding the handles of the machine.
Well, it's called a long arm machine, and you wrap your quilt on rollers and you move the machine over the fabric.
Come on.
Yeah.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
pretty incredible.
So what about this design? Why is this so special for
Well,
you?
this quilt has wonderful elements of quilting, amazing color, but it's also paper pieced, which is a technique in quilting where you use a paper design and you actually sew the fabric to the paper or right next to the paper, and it helps you get exact points and everything lines up perfectly, a little bit like carpentry where you want all the pieces to fit, and that's how this is done.
So then what happens to the paper?
You tear it off later with a pair of tweezers.
Oh my goodness, you're killing me here.
Unless you stitch it next to the paper, which this girl happens to do, so she doesn't have that problem. But there are other ways around it. That's just one way to do paper piecing. And then she put this on her long arm machine and machine quilted all of that just by eye, all those tiny little designs in between and around all the shapes.
It's hard for me to believe that was once done all by hand, all those tiny little stitches.
Right, all of that was done. And we have quilts in the show that are hand quilted.
You do?
We do.
Oh, can't wait to see them. This is truly amazing because it gets people together, and it also takes more than 3 hours to make a quilt. And there's impossible to tell how long the average time would be because it varies from a week to 2 years, and some people like Susan started things 20 years ago and still haven't finished them.
I think if you asked any quilter in this building about if they have any unfinished quilts, you'd get yes from everyone.
You know, we had a gal who quilted in front of my house in a building in front of my house in Morrisonville for some time. She finished the most beautiful quilt. She hung it up in the shop as a demonstration piece, a guy came in like the same day and said, I want it.
How lucky.
How much is it? She says, it's mine. I spent half of my life making this thing. He says, well, can you make me one exactly like it? And she did.
And she did it.
Isn't that
good for
amazing?
her?
So
Good for
people
her.
like what they like, you
They
know?
do. And I think the bottom line is color. We all respond to color.
All right. What's the one across the way that you wanted to talk about here? He can get it right from there. Tell me about it.
This is a very old technique that was popular in the 20s, and it was made with leftover scraps of velvets and silks and men's tie fabric and cigar box silks, and it was sewn to a piece of muslin with very fancy stitches, and it just got built on and built on and built on, and then they cut it down into a square and put it all together.
You know, I think there's some people who have no clue what cigar box silks are.
If I were in a quilter, I probably wouldn't either.
Well, tell me.
In the old days, cigars came in wooden boxes because it was better for the cigars, and they had a lining in those boxes of silk.
Oh, see, there you go.
And so the woman would take those pieces of silk and these quilts were not to be put on beds. These were to be draped over the piano in the parlor. These for display in the more genteel areas of the home.
Well, that looks bigger than the average bear. That's a huge one, isn't it?
It is. It's very big.
So some people actually, the quilts are utilitarian, and sometimes they're just for display.
Yes, decorative quilts. We have some art quilts here too, which is stepping outside the traditional piecing idea and getting into playing with other things on the fabric, like yarn and pieces of metal and charms and
I saw one that hopefully we'll see later that was called Dirty Laundry.
Yes.
And it has a real clothesline on it, hung over buttons with
Right.
pieces of laundry hung out on the
Yes.
quilt. The themes are myriad themes, right?
Just amazing what comes out of
Whatever
our
the
heads.
mind can conjure. All right, let's move along. We only moved about 2 feet because we don't have to go far to see the next beauty. Tell us what we have here.
Well, this quilt is an example of red work. Although it's done in black thread, that's the technique name. It's red work, and it's a piece of fabric, and you hand stitch, and it's kind of an outline stitch, and there are different names for the stitches. And all of those little buildings are all hand done with just thread.
Oh my goodness.
And then those blocks are put together with some other quilted blocks, machine piece blocks, to create the whole quilt. And that is a very old art. Red work has been around forever. And the reason it was done in red originally was the dyes used for the red yarn or thread were much more stable, and they wouldn't run if it got wet.
Who would ever guess? An education I'm getting. I wonder if these are all fantasy buildings or if they're really buildings somewhere. No one knows, huh?
There are people here who know, but I don't, unfortunately.
Beautiful. Wow, some beautiful structures. So that takes a long time just to make every one.
It does, but it's a piece you put in your purse and you take it with you in the doctor's
How
office.
many times
or-
have you seen people stitching on things? And there's so
the-
many different ways to do needlework, though, aren't there?
There are many, many.
Do you do other sewing besides quilting?
Yes, I do.
Tell me.
I do. I embroider.
Oh my goodness!
I knit.
I should have known.
I'm dabbling in some fiber arts now. I'm having some fun with that. My background is in art, so
It is.
yeah.
So your hands are never idle, and neither is your brain. I can tell.
Can't sit still.
Oh, that's just absolutely beautiful. And the one on the other side here is.
Isn't it gorgeous?
Yeah, it's just.
That's the same technique as this one. Just totally different colors, different quilting.
I love blues, so that really pleases my eye.
Blue universal.
Yeah.
Blues are
Is
always
it really?
popular. Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to say that. People love it. It looks like 10 little suns sticking out all over the place. People love those little spikes. don't they?
Spirals. Well, that pattern is called American Beauty.
Is it really? It has a name.
Yes. Most of the blocks done by quilters, the traditional blocks, have names. And they're fun names like Churn Dash and
Come on.
Through the Barn Door.
Oh,
and-
through the barn door. Oh, my goodness.
and Ohio Star, and I can't think of them all right now, but Pinwheel, Friendship Block.
So
Many, many different-
Quilting's going to be around for a long time, I can
It
tell.
is. It will continue to be around for a long time, and it has a very rich history. In fact, I understand that there were quilts made and hung up on clotheslines for the runaway slaves to know where to go next.
You know, we have talked about that quite often because we've spent a lot of time talking about the Underground Railroad and the wonderful museum they have down at Osable Chasm.
With Don Paps.
And we have read about the quilts on the clotheslines and so many clues that were left to the people who were
Yes.
trying to get north. Isn't it an amazing part of our history? So we've got another player in this quilt game.
We have a star player here. This is Jean Welsh, and Jean is the next show committee chairperson.
Hi, Jean.
Hello, how are you? Welcome to our show.
Well, we're delighted to be here, and you have to start 2 years ahead of time planning, don't you?
Yes, 2 years ahead and probably a lifetime ahead.
Well, you know, we've talked a lot about quilting since we started, and most of the people here have been in it for a long, long time. There are a few neophytes.
I'm a
see.
newbie.
Are you really?
Yes.
Never quilted before?
No, when I retired is when I started.
And
so.
what did you do? before?
I was a home economics teacher at
What did she say,
Beekmantown.
Susan said?
At Beekmantown. And
No.
I retired from there after 35 years of teaching. And so when I retired in 2004, so I began actually quilting in 2005. So really, I'm pretty new at this.
6 years. I bet your hands are getting steadier every day.
Oh, well, I don't know. As I get older, maybe my hands aren't quite so steady.
So why quilting for you?
Well, my sister is a phenomenal quilter, and I used to go down to Lockport, Buffalo area and spend time with her, and she got me hooked on it. So from then on, it's put away all of the flat pattern and draping and clothing patterns, and it's all quilting.
And now you're already planning for 2 years from now. We're doing this in 2011.
Yes.
So 2013.
And we're going to think that 13 is not going to be bad luck.
And it
going
was
to be-
strictly a volunteer effort. Nobody said, will you do it next time, Jean? Or did you
No.
come forward and say, I'll do it? Why not?
Well, after a while, came forward and said, I will do the best I can do.
You know what?
When you look around here and you see all these beautiful pieces of textile put together into gorgeous quilts, it's worth it.
We just love them.
Yes, we do.
Thank you so much for your effort. Great to
Thank you.
meet you.
Good to meet you as well, and come to the kitchen because we have an absolutely wonderful menu.
I heard about that.
Yes.
See you later.
Pulled pork. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean.
For me?
All right, now let's talk, Susan, let's talk about this one. This one you said was very special for some reason.
This is made of ties that from a family member.
Now,
And she was asked to, the quilter was asked to take these ties and make a quilt out of them.
you know,
so-
somebody, when I was in the radio business 14 years ago, even though Jean thought she heard me this morning, I haven't been on the radio since April of 1997. But in all the years I did that, I wore a white shirt and a tie and a jacket to work every single day of my life. So imagine how many ties I got for Christmas and birthdays and other special occasions. Most of them were very nice ties. And people knew that I don't dress up that much anymore. And so some months ago, somebody said, I'm a quilter. Have you got any ties? Because I need to make some. I wonder if my ties would be in that quilt. Maybe not.
This one comes from Saranac Lake.
Saranac Lake? My
But they
wife was
could be
born
in
and
there.
brought up in Saranac Lake. You never know. But in any case, we gave away hundreds and hundreds of beautiful silk ties. Just gave them to somebody because they were going to be stitch into the future. So ties. So what technique is this?
This is a patchwork. Again, we just talked about that a little earlier in the other room where they use the velvets, the silks, and whatever. This is the same technique. I think this was done on the sewing machine, but they all are little silk pieces of tie sewn to a solid background and then hand machine stitched in between. With the fancy stitches, our new sewing machines are the best.
Are
They
they
let
really
us do
computerized
these
things?
Yes. And then all sewn together into this memory quilt.
Boy, talk about memories. Now, are those patterns random, or are they?
They're
Pretty-
mostly random.
Isn't that amazing? You see some of the shapes that are almost the same, but so the person would
Right.
just get a pair of big shears and cut them apart.
You got it.
Isn't that
The-
amazing?
Taking the tie apart to begin with takes a little
Well,
time.
of course it does.
Because you have to remove the inside parts and then just get the silk ironed and use the silk fabric itself. But it's well worth it.
That's a beauty. From Saranac Lake.
Well, I think that's what the label says.
Okay. You know, I concluded that we're not going to be able to look at every single quilt here before we finish our program today, but hopefully we have whetted the appetites of our viewers enough so they'll join your guild or some other, get involved in reading about quilting, talk to their neighbors about quilting, and plan to come to Jean's show 2 years from now. Tell me about this quilt.
Well, this quilt is a takeoff on, it's called the four-patch posy. That's the name of the pattern, and it's taken by, you take one very ornate piece of fabric, and when that's the border fabric, and you get a lot of it, and you cut it up into small pieces that are identical, and then arrange 4 of those pieces in the square, and sew them together. This quilter chose to arrange them diagonally, what we call in quilting on point, and put this sashing, which is the green and the purple with the yellow
What a
squares.
great juxtaposition, you know, everything is just so tasteful and it just jumps right off the wall at you when you walk by. You
Gorgeous.
couldn't walk down this hallway without stopping and looking at it.
And the technique is beautiful because that's all this fabric makes up all those little squares, and it's just where they were cut out from the main fabric. What's really interesting about that is that if you walk around the show, you're going to see other quilts made with the same pattern that are totally different.
I will be so smart about quilting for the next 32 minutes, and after that, of course, I'll forget everything you told me today.
We'll come back
But
in
this,
2 years. We'll
this
tell you
takes
again.
some ingenuity to do this, doesn't it?
It takes time.
Yeah, time and
You
ingenuity.
have to love doing it.
But this person probably did not see a picture of this quilt in a magazine somewhere. What do you think?
Might have seen a picture in a magazine, but not with these fabrics.
Yeah.
You have to put your own spin on it.
I would not know how to combine them to make these beautiful designs. That's what makes it amazing to me. That this person did a super job. Do you know this person who made this
I'm
quilt?
not sure. Is this Bev? It's Bev Stelges again. Yes, she's a
Ah.
master quilter. She's wonderful.
And she lives in Saranac Lake. It comes down
Lake
to
Clear.
and Lake Clear, even
Yes.
farther away.
Yes.
Well, that's dedication. We'll see what she does when the snow flies. And
Oh, amazing things.
oh,
Always.
it's wonderful. All right, now let's look around at these others. Now, you said this one over here. This is obviously for a child's.
Right. This is a child's quilt, but it's the same pattern.
Same idea.
It's the same floral pattern. You can see a little bit of it on the border,
Yep.
cut up into smaller, identical pieces, and then rearranged to make these little patches. Only this quilter chose to put them on the background blocks a little wonky.
Just a little wonky. That's why they're beautiful for adults or children. Oh, I wonder if it'll ever really make it to a child's bed. What do you think?
Oh, I think so.
You think it will?
I think so. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have a whole wall in the back of the gym of mystery quilts.
Oh, come on.
No, this is one of the things our guild did this year, this past year, and we're doing it again this year. We were given a challenge to participate. And we were given a list of how much fabric to buy and what dark, lights, and mediums. And then every month we were given another set of directions. And we didn't know what it was going to look like until they were all put
Isn't it?
together.
That's like the game Clue, you know, where you're sent all over the... No kidding, I never heard of such a thing.
We have a lot of mystery quilts hanging in the
is
gym,
it?
and every one of them is different, and it's all the same pattern.
Isn't that amazing? Now, this one is almost fit for the holidays, huh? This red one?
Oh, this is beautiful. Doesn't that make you think of
It
roasting
It's almost like
hot
velvet,
chocolate
isn't it?
and
Yeah,
sitting in front of the fire?
of course. That's great. Is that a special pattern, too?
That is, I think, I'm not sure. It's a pattern that was purchased, and if you look at quilts, if you get into quilting, you can look at a quilt and break it down and say, oh, I see how that was
Oh,
done.
Not me. You can.
It's
but
like
I could
taking the
not.
puzzle backwards.
Isn't that amazing?
But it's beautiful.
That's
Just
Sandy
beautiful.
Thornton.
Sandy Thornton, who is another master quilter. She could teach us all to do anything you want to know in quilting.
You could put a hole in it, put it around the Christmas tree. I would never do that. Okay, let's move along. We don't have to move far because, as I said, eye candy. And all these quilts make you happy. Somebody just said that when they walked through the hallway. These quilts make you happy. How can you come in here and not be in a good mood?
I think if you have a need of being...
Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to give me...
No, that's fine. Continue.
If you have a need of some joy in your life, life has been a little down for you lately, this is the place to come. Because these are happy, joyous quilts.
You know what? A lot of people who haven't had any joy in their life, especially in their checkbooks, for a long, long time, and a lot of people out of work and worried about their homes and the economy in general and politics and
the weather.
Globally and the weather.
Hurricanes.
It's, hurricanes and all those things. So there is joy in Mudville.
There is.
And even at Bailey Avenue School today. Now I noticed these are a little smaller than the average quilt.
These are wall hangings. That's what they're considered, and you hang them up seasonally or wherever you want them, wherever it makes you happy to have them, and they're joyous. You have to smile when you look at them, and many of them are hand done. Like this one on the far right that's all hand stitched. All those pieces are
Just
put
so
on by
whimsical
hand.
and wonderful, and the sign says I only quilt during the day. Every day.
If we can get away with it.
How do you find time to do all the other things in your busy and exciting life?
Well, you've probably found as you get older too that some things just aren't as important anymore.
Isn't that true? Sometimes it takes a tragedy to give us that epiphany, and sometimes it takes retirement.
That's right.
And there are other factors involved. But sometimes as we grow older, we find ways to stretch a 24-hour day into 27 or 28 hours. And do you stitch far into the night, Susan?
I am a night person.
Are you? I should
Yes.
have known. Most teachers are.
Well, it was tough getting up at 6 to go to school, but
I know.
But my clock clicks on in the evening, and I can sew until 1 or 2.
Isn't that amazing? Time flies when you're having fun. So these are all, the road to my sister's house is never long. You told me it was the same gal that made all of those along the top.
All of those along the top.
Isn't that great? Look at that wonderful one with the brown edging over there.
And
Isn't that
the curvy
just-
little hill.
So this is a whole different kind of quilting.
It is.
Generally one theme instead of many different blocks. But there are some that look ancient to me, like this brown, the one with the browns and the
Oh,
greens.
that's a wonderful series of classes being offered at one of the quilt shops. They're called miniatures,
Ah,
and they're based on historical quilts, only done much, much smaller, which is much harder to do.
I love some of the themes here. That's why we want to stop in this hallway, because you don't have to have something that takes 16 chairs to drape over to work on. You can do it right on your kitchen table.
And a lot of quilters do quilt on their kitchen tables
Isn't it
or dining
wonderful?
room tables.
Yeah, that's great. Now let me ask you this: do you have one of those? What did you call that machine where you
The
have
long arm
Do you
machine.
have one?
I do,
Oh.
but it's just a recent
Oh.
purchase,
Oh.
and I'm learning, and
Oh.
it's a big learning curve.
Don't hiccup or sneeze when you're using that thing.
You learn where the off button is fast.
Did you?
I did.
Did you ever have to take any stitches out?
Many.
Do you? I don't know why I brought that up, but I
you
know
do.
what it would be like if I ever got my hands on that thing.
We call it unsewing.
Oh, you're unsewing? I love it. Okay. We're at the Quilters Guild show at Bailey Avenue School in mid-October 2011 with Susan Donahue, and we are having fun, aren't we?
We are.
This, talk about eye candy. This one has just blown all the springs in my adult pate. It's truly amazing. Talk about it a little bit, how it affects
Oh,
you.
I just look at it and giggle because I see all the balloons and the umbrellas and the little turtles scurrying in the shallow water, and it's just plain fun to look
A
at.
summer day in the Jersey Shore.
And-
Joy Mazer.
Yes.
I wonder if she lived on the Jersey Shore.
I don't know, but I lived in New Jersey for many years.
Did you?
And
Where?
Montclair.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, I've talked about it many times because my favorite aunt lived in Maplewood, and so I spent a lot of time around the oranges and on the Jersey Shore with another favorite aunt. But you just told me a cute turtle story, because turtles show up in my life for some reason in lots of different ways, along with dragonflies. But what's the story from Hawaii?
Well, in Hawaii, the natives believe that the sea turtles come in and swim in the shallow water with the little children and protect them while they're in the water.
And you know, there are signs along the beaches in Waikiki and many other places on the islands that say, watch out. And the same is true down in Tybee Island near Savannah, Georgia, where the turtles come in all the time, and there are signs everywhere, watch out for turtles. Calvin and I were doing a show at a place where they used to raise frogs for frog legs and send them to restaurants, and almost stepped on a turtle walking across. Little teeny, tiny turtle. All right, next is one that I told you about, I think on camera a few minutes ago, because I love it.
Well, there's a good story in this one, too.
There's always a good story, Susan.
Remember earlier I mentioned that some of the two quilt shops donated their samples.
Yes.
Well, this is one of them. And the beauty of this is that it combines machine embroidery with other piecing techniques, and she's just put this together beautifully. I mean, this could be your backyard and your back door, and the quilt's hanging on the line to air,
Yeah,
and they're dimensional.
that's the best part of it. Look at this with the little teeny tiny clothespins. And the milk. I got
milk
two
can.
milk cans on my front yard. Yeah, that could be anybody's backyard.
The family friend and the little puppy dog there, and just
And
too
that's-
fun.
That's Carla Strauss's. Did I
Yes,
get
Carla
that?
Strauss, yes,
And she donated this.
she did.
Isn't that?
She's an amazing quilter, too.
Well, you talk about a whimsical idea. It caught my eye the minute I walked by. Just great. All I had to do was an about face, and I haven't done those in a long time. This was made in 2011, unless somebody put a date in the future on there and made it a long time ago. This is another good one.
This is another whimsical quilt.
My home has a blue roof. Look at the roofs on all of these homes. Isn't that wonderful?
Well, the beauty of this quilt is that every block is a little different. Some of it is machine pieced, some of it's hand applique, I believe. Yeah, definitely hand applique. And it's all hand quilted.
Oh, come on.
This is all hand quilted. If you look closely, you can see the stitching around the shapes where the person hand quilted it.
I wouldn't know the difference, and my eyes are good enough to tell, but I believe you. Nellie Vogt? Mm-hmm. Is it? And I love the little signs. I only quilt on days that end with Y. Don't you love it? This is also very, very nice. And you wonder if some of these ideas have been copied?
Well, a lot of these patterns are published.
Oh, they are.
And we get quilting magazines. There are many publications for
Aha.
quilters. And there's a lot online now available, too.
So people don't copyright their quilts, huh?
Well, we're
No,
very
it's-
careful about, we've become very, very careful about copywriting and how it impacts quilting, and we're becoming much more
You know,
aware.
I have no idea how that would work in a quilting business, and I'm sure that if it's published in a magazine, it might be open to the public.
You have to read the article carefully.
Do you really?
You do. Some
Who would
magazines,
ever think of that? I never would.
well, we've been caught up by it and learning that we need to be aware that this is important to the artists who create the patterns, too.
Now, is this a special pattern? Do you see this kind of pattern along the edge in other quilts?
That's a very old standard pattern. That's been around forever and ever and ever, that wavy scallop design.
Well, it certainly works here, and as I told you before, and you said, blue is almost a universally loved color.
It is.
It's always a placid, wonderful, peaceful color for me, and has been since I was a small child. So I like the blue roofs, and we can tell her if we ever see her that we do.
I hope she gets to see this when it's
Me
online.
too.
My sister's like that too.
Cody Little and Calvin Castine at the Quilters Show at Bailey Avenue School. Susan, this is special because Calvin mentioned before about the ties and how the old quilters always used ties. And they're here because this whole thing is hand done.
Right.
me
Every
a little about
bit
it.
of this quilt is hand done. Instead of machine or hand quilting, with some materials, such as this all wool
Oh
quilt,
my goodness.
little threads are
Here
used
they are, little.
to hold the two layers together so that it won't come apart and shift. And so this is what it's called, a hand-tied technique. And it's also used on utility quilts. You know, the ones you just want to throw on the bed and sleep under. A lot of those are tied, but all of this is done, like I said, in wool, and every single little piece is hand stitched on.
All hand, and you know, I have to confess that when you get close to it, you can tell.
You
You
can.
can see the stitches are hand done, and that makes it even more precious because you know every one of those. But I don't
Was
know.
carefully selected for the color and then carefully cut out, and wool frays. You have to be very careful with it. I machine wash it and shrink it to get the fibers tighter.
Oh, that's
Most
a good
quilters
idea.
do
Who
that.
would think of that? I wouldn't.
And then-
Garden Gatherings, Nancy Dayton.
Nancy Dayton does amazing things with wool. She's another amazing quilter. They all are.
So, you know, any kind of fabric, it's all fair game, isn't it?
It sure is.
Colors, fabrics,
Mm-hmm.
stitching, techniques, old-fashioned, new.
Well, the traditional quilts are cotton,
Yeah.
but you can step outside that door anytime you want and do some other fun things.
And I imagine people do. If they're anything like me, they operate 90% of the time outside the box, as they said. My mother used to say, off the beaten path. You know, when you come to a fork in the road, take it, as one of our beloved former Yankee baseball players once said. But that's good. You're just letting your creative juices flow when you sit there. Now, let me ask you this question while we're standing here. As you start a new quilt, do you always have an end product in mind? Or is it just, let's get started and see what comes out of this?
Well, I personally will start with something, and I have a picture in my head, and as it grows and it changes almost
Oh, it
every
does.
time, and I will start maybe with a pattern, and then it becomes my own, and I throw some parts out and add some in.
Oh, do you really?
I do.
I imagine a lot of people are that
they
way.
do.
There are quilts all around us, and we just want it, and we apologize, as we always do, for not being able to show every quilt, to mention everybody's name on television because of the tremendous time and effort and creativity. And, you know, purples.
No.
Look at this.
I love purples.
Oh, everybody loves purples too, and look at the great birds. My wife and I are both great bird lovers, nature lovers in general. So any of the nature themes with the flowers and the animals and the birds are wonderful for me. And there's every possible color of the rainbow, and I think some colors were invented just for this show. It looks like it.
They may have been, because we do have some members that dye their own fabric.
Oh, do they really?
Yes.
Oh, that's another
That
thing we
too.
haven't even mentioned. Dye their own fabric?
Yeah.
Have you ever tried it?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
A tie-dyed quilt?
Yes. Why not?
That's absolutely amazing. Creamsicle fudge?
Yes.
You see the name on this one, right? Sue Donahue. When did you make it?
I made this past year.
Did you really? Now, did you have this? This reminds me of a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, it is a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. It's actually a traditional block, and it was a class I took. And then after I put the center part together, I started putting on the border. And again, like I just said, I had to add some of me to it, and I changed the border pattern and just had fun
I'm
with
sure
it.
you add some of me to everything you do. The color alone is enough to light up a room without incandescent lights. It's just... Did you have the color in mind when you started too?
Oh, yes.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I started with the color.
Oh.
Yeah, most of my quilts start with the color. I see a fabric and I say, I have to have that fabric. I have to do something with it. And then I start adding other things to work with it and play with it and have fun with it.
And these are traditional geometric shapes, aren't they?
They
These-
are.
Do they have a name?
This is called, the name of the block is called Spinning Rail Fence, or spinning rails.
Close enough. I wouldn't know the difference. Spinning rails. Okay.
And it's really just this square
Okay, I'm with you.
with that little corner added on,
Uh,
and it's repeated.
over and over.
And that's, most quilts are that simple.
Now, another simple question from a simple mind like mine. How many hours on this quilt alone?
But I have no
You
idea.
never keep track?
Never.
Some people keep a journal of how many,
I keep a journal of quilts,
oh, you
and
do?
when I made them, and maybe some thoughts on the process of picking out the fabrics. But I don't log my hours because it would drive me crazy.
Does everyone who quilt really, really love the process? I mean, there's something special about this process that I've detected since I came here today. And we talked about joy
Well,
and feeling good, and it's got to be a wonderful release, a great relaxation, almost like meditation, stitch
is.
after stitch after stitch
We call
after
it
stitch.
therapy.
Well, I can see that.
It is.
I can see that.
You wouldn't do this if you didn't love it.
Yeah.
It can get very intense. So,
And-
yeah.
and like I used the word myriad themes before, because there's a word that applies,
But
even
you-
though it's never used grammatically correctly and very often.
True.
But it's just so many different ideas, how many themes, and it's as many people as there are. If they all quilted, they would all have different ideas,
They
wouldn't
would, every single one. But I do have to mention one thing, Gordy. You see all these quilts here. I can't tell you how many quilts have been made in our guild and given away. We make quilts for community outreach makes, I don't know, over 200 quilts that were given away last year.
Wow.
And we do pet beds, and we deliver them to the
Who
all
would
the
guess
places.
pet beds?
Pet beds. Well, you know, they're always little scraps
Of
when you're
course,
done.
yeah.
We stuff them into bigger pieces and make pillows for pets out of them. And we do amazing, amazing community work in the guild. And you won't see any of those quilts here because they're gone.
Well, I'm convinced that you are a laudable organization.
Thank you.
And a bunch of wonderful, wonderful people.
Thank
So
you.
let's look at some more quilts.
Okay.
Well, we've made the rounds, but we haven't really made the rounds because there are, how many quilts? Did you count them? 350?
Over 350.
Isn't
we're
that
entered,
truly
yeah.
amazing? And we've shown maybe 100 or maybe a little more than that today. But we decided when we passed this one that we might want to stop here. Because I looked at that and I said, stuff who? Isn't that the best with the turkey who's looking around saying, you know, we're doing this in mid-October 2011 and Thanksgiving is right around the corner. And there's something foul about this whole thing, isn't there? Isn't it great? Look at the chickens and the turkeys on the, is that the same person on the bottom? Who is that?
No,
Oh,
no.
two different people.
Two different people, but different points of view of fowl.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful? And anybody who's ever been to Hawaii, any of the islands of Hawaii, know there are fowl everywhere. And roosters don't just crow at sunrise, no matter what you might have read in the Bible or anywhere else. They crow anytime they feel like it, starting about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
We went up into Waimea Canyon on Kauai and said, there won't be any chickens up here. We got out of the car, thousands and thousands of feet above sea level, and we were greeted by... So anyway, this is beautiful. This is a barnyard theme. And look at the interesting stitching here, reminiscent of a wire fence, huh?
Chicken wire.
Chicken wire fence. Makes perfect sense to me.
Me too.
Wonderful, wonderful themes. You know, I don't know how many different animals are represented here today. We've seen everything from mice to, I don't know if I saw an elephant today.
Yes, there's a whole quilt of elephants.
There's a whole quilt. Oh, well, I should have known. We'll save the elephants today. So we're at Bailey Avenue School. This is the Quilters, Champlain Valley Quilters Guild of New York.
Right.
Did I get it right?
You did.
First time today. It involves a large number of members, and you're hoping you've signed up one new member since we've been here.
And we've only been open
Less than an
hour. So we're
hopefully
off to
you'll
a good
sign up
start.
a lot more. You have the wonderful quilt that you're going to raffle off for a very good cause. But as you mentioned a few minutes ago, Susan, lots of these quilts are given to good causes.
Yes,
It's like my wife and her crocheted Afghans, hundreds and hundreds through the years. She hasn't made any a few years now, but there's no member of our family or our extended family or our grandchildren or great-grandchildren that doesn't have one of those one of those Afghans. But quilts are the things memories are made of.
And memories make quilts too.
Absolutely do. And does everybody sign their quilt? I've noticed.
Yes. They are all signed. We ask people to put a plastic glove in the program so they can actually pick the quilt up and look at the back and see the sign on the back.
Oh, is
but
that?
we ask people not to touch them
Well, that makes perfect
without
sense.
a glove.
That makes perfect sense.
But I can show you. It's a requirement. You have to have a label.
Oh, I see.
That's
No,
the
there you
paper
go.
label.
That's
There
the
should
whole.
be a fabric label on it. No,
Like-
but I'm
like-
sure this
like the
one has
people-
one. Oh well, they're there.
Like most good artists, and some that aren't so good, like all the pictures I've drawn in my lifetime, they're all signed and dated,
They should be documented
just so you can say, oh, that's what I was doing in 1972.
because we forget.
Yeah. So once again, let's tell people how they can get in touch with you. They can look at your website, which is
It's cvqgny.org. Champlain Valley Quilter Guild New York.org, because there's another one in Vermont that's CVQGVT.
and your meetings are.
We meet the second Wednesday of every month here at Bailey School at 6:30 at night.
Isn't that great? And Calvin will be putting a copy of this program, a link on that website so that other people can see it.
I can't wait to see
You'll be
it.
telling me about it, and I will also send it to all my friends, and you'll in turn send
I
it to
will.
all your friends, and mostly all the members of this wonderful quilting guild. I would like to take a moment to thank all those people who've ever stitched anything in their lives. And I have to tell you that I did have, well, maybe not an epiphany, but when I asked you if there are any males in the quilting guild, I was thinking back to a time when I was about 6 or 7, and two little characters named Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy were just coming about. And I begged my mother to get me a Raggedy Ann, Raggedy Andy doll, but she did one better. She bought the patterns, gave me a needle and thread, and said, "Here, make them." And I wish they existed today because they would be filled with humor and wonderful nostalgia. And I'd probably shed a tear in reading because the stitches were very strange. But I did treasure those Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy dolls.
Well, you're welcome to join the guild.
I'm welcome to watch you until the day you die, 60 years from now. Thanks to you, Susan Donahue, for being with us today.
Well, thank you for taking the time to come and show off our work.
And thanks all the members and everybody else who ever dreamed of quilting. Get involved in the club. That's one thing to do it in the privacy of your own home, but another thing to find people with like interests.
It just makes it richer, much richer when you share it with others.
I love it.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of our viewers who give us suggestions and comments, and especially those who write generous checks and send them to Calvin Castine at Hometown Cable on the Ridge Road in Champlain. It's what keeps us going. And who knows where we're going to be next time for our